Hi, so I think we've all been staying at home for the better part of a month now, probably a bit longer than that. I've been pretty well quarantined out here on the Kelly farm, which there's definitely worse places to be. In that time, my hair has continued growing. I normally get it cut only before hot races, which generally works well for me, but with Barkley canceled, the last time was in late August, just before Tour de Giant, and who knows when the next one will be now. And this here, this is completely uncharted territory, so there's no telling where that will go. But I know that a lot of people haven't been able to run their planned races, probably can't even do the types of runs they're used to doing, or maybe are sitting at home recovering from one of the many huge virtual races that have been going on. And in any of those cases, I wanted to show a few things that you can still kind of work on without any running while you're inside. Ultra running is about a lot more than running, and when you're racing for multiple days, the little things can really add up. One of my favorite stats is that the year I finished Barkley, if I had taken an extra 30 seconds per hour, I would not have finished, is how close that was. So a lot of these things will probably be completely second nature to anyone who has been in the sport for quite a while, but still kind of easy to overlook, especially if you're just getting started out. So I'll run through a few of those things here and hopefully might learn something useful. So the first thing that I used quite a bit at Barkley is to just be able to swap gear, access anything in your pack while on the move. So being able to take off a jacket, put on a jacket, get a headlamp or something that's in the back of your pack, just rotate the pack around to your front, unzip, stuff it in, and then rotate it back to the back, and you're good to go. And again, saving 30 seconds, 1 minute, many times over the course of something that long can be huge. Brett Mowney, before he set his fastest known time on the John Muir Trail, he practiced refilling his water bottles because as many times as he was doing that over the course of the event, it was a huge thing. A big part of that, though, is having your pack organized properly to where you know where every single thing is, and the things you need to access the most often are in the most accessible places. So in Spine, where there was a huge kit list, I had all of the things that I was least likely to need stuffed at the very bottom. My camp stove, my fuel canister, those were all buried quite deep in my pack, and the stuff that I might really need and need often, spare headlamp battery, things like that, right at the top to where I could switch it around and grab it real quick on the move. Also think about what's going to need to stay dry, what's going to need to not get compressed, so if you have food items that could get smashed or crumbled, and then gear that can get wet, that can soak up moisture, be sure to protect it. Better yet, even put that stuff in Ziploc bags. You don't want it getting wet and weighing you down, and then worst of all, you don't want it to be wet once you put it on, if it's extra clothing. Don't be afraid as you're doing that to customize your packs however you see fit. These sorts of packs are made incredibly well to fit almost any person in any use case, but there are still small things that you can do to make the pack more suitable for your own preferences. A great example of that is some of these right here on the Ultimate Direction bottles. They have, you may not be able to see this in the light, but there are pass-throughs. right here. And so this is made so that if you're one of the people that prefers a water bottle with the long straw that you can get to your mouth more easily, that can pass through there. Me, I don't use those. So generally I actually stitch the bottom of these shut, and then I have an extra pocket, which is great for me. But whatever you do to your pack, however you decide to pack it, always train with it. Always be sure that you're comfortable with the way that everything is fitting in there, and that there's not anything that, again, over the course of 60 hours is going to go from a tiny problem to a huge one. If you do have multiple packs lying around, it's a great thing to be able to kind of have a second one packed and ready to go at an aid station or at your drop bag. My computer just went to sleep there. Later on in the race, if you're not thinking properly, if you're half asleep, if your fingers are numb from the cold, you don't really have to worry about reorganizing and packing a pack. You can just grab a new one and go. Farther on the customizations, I grabbed this one. This is a halo, and one thing that I like to do with a lot of packs is add one of my wife's hair ties here up top above the water bottle. So this is just where I have attached a hair tie that I can then pull over the top of the water bottle. And what that does is it keeps that bottle from bouncing at all. As it gets empty, as I'm running downhill, it holds it in place right there quite well. On the bottles, another thing, the soft flasks, as you empty them out, they'll get quite compressed. Going into an aid station, refilling, especially if you have some sort of powder, you're likely to make a pretty big mess just going at it directly. So just really quickly blow it up like a balloon, dump your powder and your water in, you're good to go. If it is somewhere where you have a drop bag, another incredibly useful thing to have in that situation is one of those little collapsible funnels. They just, collapse into a tiny little sheet. I don't have one here with me, but that's extremely useful, again, if you have a drink mix, to get it into that bottle. Things that I am sure I always have on my pack, pretty much no matter what, whether I'm in a race or going out for a run myself. Have one of these. This is a BeFree water bottle, which has a built-in filter at the top, which has a really good flow rate on it, so I know that if I'm out a little longer, if I'm getting a little dehydrated, as long as there's any sort of water source in the spine, I actually filled this up in a peat bog, then I'm good. I've got some water to keep me going. Headlamp or head torch. Again, you never know when you're going to get stuck out there longer than when expected, and the last thing you want is to be out there in the dark with no light. Compass, always kind of know which direction just to get back to safety, to get back to civilization. Phones break, they lose signal, the batteries die. Compasses are pretty sturdy and always work. Other thing, I think some people noticed in the spine that I did to make things more accessible and save room in my pack. Jackets and other outerwear I just tie around my waist. It's really quickly to get on or off on the go, even quicker than switching the pack around to the front. And again, in the case of the spine, where I had to fit everything in a 17-liter pack, quite an extensive kit list, this saved me a lot of room. So this is a big trick I use. It does tend to make it look like you're wearing a skirt. When I did it at Tour de Géant, I got a whole lot of bravas rather than bravo. the feminine form of the word, but that's okay. I was quite comfortable, and I had my rain jacket where I needed it. Next thing is poles. So I have always used these at Barkley, and I went through a stretch where I kind of stopped using them as much because I feel like on flats and downhills they slow me down a bit. But really the big thing is if it's a race where you think your muscles are going to go out first, where your quads are going to stop working, then they're a huge benefit. If it's a race where you expect you're going to be gassed and winded, and that's what's going to slow you down, then probably poles aren't your best bet. But in any case, get them to where they're about a 90-degree angle. Most of them now have these double grips, which are quite handy. Going flat or downhill, you'd want to grip higher up, and then going uphill, you can just kind of slip your thumb out of the strap there and let your hand slide down, or even better, even lower down, only put your thumb through there. And that's what you want to use on steep uphills. If I learned anything from the swimming portion of my triathlon days, it's that you generate a lot more power going from here to here when you're using your lats than up here when you're using primarily your biceps. So going uphill, choking down, you can get the angle lower and get more power to help push you up the hill. Using these in a race, most of the time you'll go back and forth between having them out and having them stowed. Definitely stowing them and removing them from your pack is a huge thing to practice. Also, just collapsing them. One thing that I've kind of learned is to grip them in the middle. I've found that if I grip them at the bottom and just pull, I tend to pull it too far, fold it over, and then I don't have enough slack to fold down that bottom section. But if I grip it in the middle instead, then I can just pull it, let it hang, pull that, and let it hang, and then I'm good to go. Sometimes, especially in a race like Barkley, I won't necessarily want to stow the pack or stow the pole, but I just want to have my hands free for a second to get food or something. So most of the time, the little elastic bands to stow the pole, there's one at the bottom, so I'll just stick the top of the pole through that, and then if I'm going up a hill, I'll just let that drag behind me like that, and it stays in place quite well. My hands are free to get food, and then you can pull it back out pretty quickly. So again, poles, anything you can do to quickly stow them, get them out of the way, free up a hand to get food is going to add up to quite a bit of time over the course of a race. Lots of little tricks like that to be able to put things on or stow things with one hand. Headlamps, for example, just kind of hook the front of it under your chin, then you pull it back up, and you're good to go without having to use both hands, maybe your other one's on your pole, or grabbing some food. Food, for that matter, a number of things that are quite useful. One, these little Ziplocs with the easy open tops, they have like a little tab here that you can grab and use that to open. That is a lifesaver when your hands are freezing cold and barely work. And for that matter, if you use some sort of bar, just do yourself a favor and go ahead and start the opening of it. Tear a little split beforehand, because when your hands get cold, that can get a bit difficult to do. Saving yourself Sorry, I've got things lying around here somewhere. Saving yourself entirely from having to tear things open. I love to use these tiny, soft gel flasks where you can just open it up, pour some gel in, to where during the race, rather than having to tear through half a dozen of those tiny individual packs, you just have it all here in your flask. These generally hold 5 or 6, the equivalent of 5 or 6 gels. You can take it out with one hand, get however much you want of it, and stow it back, and you don't have to worry about trash in that case either. Back to the cold hands thing. Really, anything you're going to have to do during the race, think about whether you can do it with numb fingers that have lost quite a bit of dexterity. For this, I love to use these gloves that have this built-in mitten on them, so you know they can act as normal gloves that really give you a good amount of dexterity. And then they have a built-in mitten that pops out here that can give you quite a bit of extra warmth, but again, still allow you to quickly use your fingers when you need to. And if there is a race that is particularly cold, then I use one of these over mittens that, again, it's the exact same principle. It keeps my hand nice and toasty, but I can pop my fingers out whenever I need to access food or anything else in my pack. Because that's one of the most difficult things in a cold race. You really need to eat to keep warm, but it's a bit of a pain to eat because it's harder to access things when you've got all those layers on and when your fingers aren't quite working properly. Other pieces of gear that are, you know, again, small things that you wouldn't normally think about. Everyone thinks about shoes, about pack, about your rain jacket, which, by the way, lightweight rain jacket is something else that I will always take with me at this point whenever I'm headed out anywhere, whether it's a race or a casual run out in the mountains here by myself, because you just never know. And these jackets are extremely lightweight. They pack extremely small. So contrary to what some well-known videos might have you believe, I prefer to have a jacket and not just a plastic bag for those types of conditions. So a few of the other little pieces of gear that people often overlook that can really cause big problems or pay big dividends over a long race. The first is probably socks. I generally go with a pair of XOSKIN toe socks with a normal pair of socks over top of them. Found that kind of double layer and their socks, I went the spine and was pretty well blister free. I had a few near the end, but not anything that was debilitating. The Grand Round I did last year in rain the entire time, not a single blister on that. The other thing that can really prevent issues with your feet, prevent blisters, is a pair of gaiters. So these are extremely quick and easy to put on, and preventing any sort of dirt and grit and rocks from getting in your shoes is huge. So again, just something to kind of seal off the top of your shoe there. The terrain you're running is a huge factor in how much those are needed. I've found that people don't use them as much in England. They tend not to have as many rocks and debris strewn trails as we have here. And finally, just a few things that maybe you can think about for running once we are able to get back out there. Again, going with the small things that add up. You know, most ultras, most of the time, you'll power hike on steep uphills, but a lot of those uphills, especially around here, they're going to have an up, and then they're going to have a small flat, and then they're going to go up, and then a flat again, and the tendency is to kind of just keep power hiking on those short flat sections. But over the course of a big race or a long ascent, again, those really add up, and it's free, good running time that you're giving up there. The other big one is on downhills. So people tend to hold back and worry about thrashing their quads on the downhills, and rightfully so. You don't want to just unleash and go all out, but learning how to run downhills well is a huge thing in not giving up speed. So particularly one thing around here where the terrain is really undulating and we have a lot of obstacles like creeks and trees and strip mines and other things, it forces the trails to have a lot of tight switchbacks. And you know, people think a lot of times running downhill is about what type of top speed you can maintain. On that type of terrain, it's really about how much you can avoid your bottom speed. So going into those switchbacks, being able to accelerate coming out of them, just one or two quick strides to where you can get back up to cruising speed and let gravity do the work, is huge on those downhills. And then the other thing on switchbacks around here is oftentimes there will be a conveniently placed tree right on the inside of the switchback, which you know, make sure the tree's big enough to where you're not going to hurt it, but small enough to where it's not going to hurt you. And you know, you can just kind of use that as a pole to swing yourself around the switchback and keep your momentum going. Just be careful with it. I've got a nice scar on the inside of my arm from Barkley one year where I tried that on a big descent, and it not only put a nice gash in me, but ripped off my watch, and then I was out of watch for the rest of the race. The one other thing on hills I'll mention is going up. When you get to the top, as soon as you crest it, go ahead and start running again. That again, just like those short flats on the ascents, that's time that can really add up, and a lot of people kind of relax at that point and recover and rest from the big climb they just had. But that's a good opportunity to really make up a lot of ground. And the last thing I'll mention is when we are able to get back to racing, you know, if you're like me, be sure you get your hair cut well before the race so you don't get sunburnt while you're out there. Just like a lot of other things you want to take care of well in advance. Never trim your toenails the night before a race. Always give yourself a week or so. But hopefully we'll be able to get back to those things soon enough, and I hope maybe some of this was useful.